Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the TFTuesday Podcast. My name is Zill. It's good to have you all back here again today. My illustrious co-host is still off, but we're wishing him well. In the meantime, I've been busying myself with a few different things. I actually got to go to Fan Expo Canada a little while back, and I purchased even more Rocket Funkos. If you can believe it, I believe I almost have every single one now, because I am totally not obsessed with Rocket. But one other thing I am obsessed with is people joining our Patreon. So if you ever feel like you'd like to chip in, you can always hit us up on patreon.com/TFTuesdayPod. We have a wonderful community on Discord that I'm very thankful for. They keep me sane, they tease me, and overall, they're a great time. So if you want to continue to support what we do and also have a community of like-minded people, you can always join us over there. But enough about that. I'm really excited because we have a very special guest joining us today who's going to be chatting with us all about the world of streaming and werewolves. So, Doryuu, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, it is such an honor to be here. I have been following the TFTuesday podcast for quite some time, so this is a very, very big special opportunity. My name is Doryuu, or as some other folks know me as DoryuuZ on Twitch, which is my handle there. I advertise myself or introduce myself as an FPS werewolf. But that is primarily because one, I have shifted. No pun intended. I've shifted my character from previously a German Shepherd and then into a Were Shepherd, and now I've just fully embraced my werewolf side. So I am a werewolf by day and werewolf by night. Really, just my human form during the daytime. But lately, I've been doing a lot of variety FPS, also known as first-person shooter games. So that is kind of like my whole thing as of the current day, but being a very, very kind of ebb and flow type person with my hobbies, I have jumped around from like thing to thing to thing, and I would say in the last few years, streaming has been kind of my full-time focus. So I've been doing a lot of FPS gaming, and I have had the awesome opportunity of playing professionally for Team B4 in Apex Legends, and now I'm just kind of coasting by and just kind of jumping into whatever first-person shooter games kind of like pique my interest. So that's kind of my whole gig at the moment, but I'm also kind of like slowly dipping into a little bit more variety is what I'm trying to do. So
hell yeah. And if I recall correctly, one of your past lives is also as a very good dancer and I believe you've done that at a number of different cons. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And I'm always very humble whenever you or any others are just like, oh my god, like you dance, or like, oh, I loved your dancing, because I as an artist, I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh, I see my flaws, I must work on them, but to always get compliments, it's always very, very humbling. I'm very grateful. But yes, I love dancing.
Yeah, no, I did get a chance, I think, to catch one of your performances once, and I was really impressed. So I feel like I have to mention that because
oh, thank you.
It's like, seeing your stuff online, that was the first time I saw you like kind of at a distance in person. So I got to give a shout out to that. So
oh, thank you so much. I'm actually it's funny you mentioned that, because one thing that has been a time to time conversation on my stream is when someone who is newer to the channel or just recently discovered me, they'll just be like, wait, you dance? And then I have some longtime friends who've been supporters of my channel since like before I was a streamer, and they'll be like, what? Wow, what a world we live in. They don't know about his dancing. And then they have a reminder that like, no, he hasn't done like a video or a dance comp in a long time, Yeah. So can't blame them.
No, but it's always a cool little piece of lore, I'd say, to know about, so
thank you. I love talking dance. I never get the opportunity, so it makes me happy.
Hell yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, we talk a lot about transformation on this podcast, but I was curious to hear a little bit more about your journey into the transformation fandom, and I asked this in particular because I remember back in the day when I started seeing you kind of crop up in art pieces and also the art pieces that you did. I always remembered you by the red bandana. That was like my number one go-to. I was like, oh, that's probably Doryuu. So I was curious to know how you like kind of found your way into the fandom and then also kind of created that niche for yourself.
Yeah, man, the finding my way into the fandom, I always love thinking back to how the pathing took its course, and I think always back to transfer as sort of
Mm,
my foot in the door into discovering the furry fandom.
right.
Because back then, I think one of the few earlier transformation websites that I used to browse were, I don't know if you recall Fox's Transformation, who
Oh
now
my
goes by
God.
Foxy. So
That was like I just gotta say that was like my number one site back in the day. Like I checked it religiously. There were the phases. It had
same,
such an influence
yes.
on me.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that makes me so happy to hear because very relatable. It was Foxy, or Fox at the time, and then gosh, I remember their monthly updates with the sort of like audio logs they would do about like what projects they were
Yes.
working on, and I guess like upcoming like things and sort of like just various TF topics. I
Yeah.
love that so much.
So good.
Um I was like Fox at the time, Transfer again, and then
Mhm.
Shadow Lord Inc. has been around for five ever. I used that a
Oh
lot
yeah.
back then. And I think it was Werecats Were Creatures was one of my go-tos just because
Mhm.
they used to like capture TF scenes in media, but they would do it in like a picture format because we didn't have the beauty of
Yes.
like, good video players back then. So
Any file was like Russian roulette to some degree because it's like, oh, did I get this off of LimeWire? Is it going to work well? Am I going to get a virus? Or like even just loading something off of a page or like, okay, let's see if it's going to load. How bad's my internet today? Like,
Oh man, and you mentioned internet, and it working its job back then, and we
yeah.
were my parents were very, not to like go on a tangent, but
Mm,
my parents were very very particular with not going crazy like with their finances on like computer hardware, internet costs, things like that. So we had like slow internets. So
yeah.
that was a pain. And when it came to like loading any media, oh my gosh, it took five ever.
It was ridiculous, and I don't know about you, but I very much had family computer is in the living room situation, so
Ah, yes.
it was always fun to if you thought maybe I don't know looking at this transformation stuff might be bad. I might have to go like sneak out of my room at like 11 p.m. and like go and
Ah,
look at it on the computer.
yeah, that makes me so happy to hear that you also suffered the same
I
experience
did.
because we also had our computer in it was like kitchen area,
Yeah.
and we had like a very open style house.
Hmm.
So it echoed when you were in the kitchen.
Oh
And
yeah.
so I had to sneak on there a lot, especially when browsing transformation art. It was always
Oh
like
yeah.
after school when my parents weren't home, I'd like walk home from school or take the school bus.
Oh
And
yeah.
I'd have like a 2 hour window of whatever I wanted to do on there without any monitoring or anything like
Yes.
that. So it would always be like, yes, time to browse transformation stuff. And, I didn't really know it at the time. I was just like, my obsession with werewolves and, not even just like everything TF related.
Yeah.
So.
I gotta ask, did you also then go back and like clear your history cache when you looked at transformation websites?
Oh man. So I know I'm kind of veering away from finishing answering the question, but this ties into everything. So to answer that, no, I did not. And
Okay.
this actually brings up a very funny story that I've talked about with Azel before, and I've brought up from time to time when it happens. But I got caught specifically from a piece of Fox transformation. Well, it was Fox's
Ooh.
transformation art.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you remember? I have a vivid memory with this. Do you remember the husky swimmer transformation piece where it's like the swimmer? He's like holding his stomach and he's like looking at his paw, and
Yes.
then his tail is like perfectly curling. It's a little
Yes.
side angle. That picture was the one that my dad would monitor my sort of internet usage, and I didn't know about cookies. I didn't know about browsing history at the time.
Oh my
So he
gosh.
saw that, and I will never forget being completely just like It was a big blur in my head, but I just remember feeling like, oh my god, 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 like what do I do? What do I do? And I think I said something really stupid of like what I was doing and how I came across that. But I can't tell you what it was. I just remember him seeing that, and I don't know what happened from there. You know, the rest is history. Who knows what he thought? Who knows what he said? So yeah, that's my little tidbit on not knowing about browsing history and all that.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. The only reason why I asked was because I did that. Like, I cleared my stuff religiously, and part of the reason why was my dad worked in IT. Well, he still works in IT, but like he worked in IT at the time, and he was the one who helped us get our first laptop as well as the desktop we had. And so I was like very much like, okay, my dad knows everything about computers. If I'm going to be using this, I need to know everything too. What I didn't realize at the time was like, yeah, my dad worked in IT, but that didn't mean he knew everything about computers. So I, in fact, ended up finding some of the stuff he was looking at.
No way.
And I saw it one time, and I blocked the memory. I don't even remember what it was. It was something very probably like straight and soft core and whatever. But I like, okay. Anyways, deleting the history. So I never had the like parent confrontation that I know a few people have had in terms of like, oh, like, why are you looking at this? I did have them find some furry art that I drew a long time ago, but it was very like, just like, this is a furry character. It wasn't anything like TF related. And they were just like, why is this in your drawer? And I was like, and they're like, you can just put it in your notebook. I don't and I was like, okay, sure, great, cool. And then we didn't talk about it afterwards. I mean, they know I'm a furry now, but like, they didn't really think much of it at the time, honestly, which I was very thankful for. So.
Oh, that's so sweet. There's like a level of like innocence to that, and it's so relatable because it's us perpetuating this idea of how weird it is to us. And then the reflect, the way it comes out, like, real life is like, what are you doing looking at my wolf art,
Yeah, exactly. Honestly, the big incident for me was we uploaded, my sister and I, we used to make little home movies, and we uploaded one or two of them to YouTube. And that was what freaked my parents out. And they got very upset with us because they were like, oh, they can see where you live, and therefore someone's going to come to your house and do something, which, like, I was like, okay, we'll delete it. Oh my God. But like, anyways, that was their concern, which, is neither here nor there. But sorry, to your way into the TF fandom. So you were looking at the art, you had the computer in the living room and such. When did you start to like make the transition towards like making the art yourself and commissioning some?
Let's see. So I would say the transition started a little after I discovered, let's see. So I think back a little even before then. And do you remember the artist Spunky by any chance? Does that ring a bell?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So Spunky, gosh, I'm like, oh, where did it all begin with like werewolves and my fascination with that? And Spunky used to do a lot of John Talbane fan art. And if you don't know what John Talbane is, they're a fighting game character from the game Darkstalkers, which was produced from Capcom.
Gotcha.
And it actually kind of ties a little back to like some like core roots of how my journey kind of all went. And so I grew up bowling. Bowling was like my main sport, and I would go to different bowling alleys for like various tournaments and whatnot. And when I was a kid, or like I'd probably say like about like maybe 9-10, we went to a bowling alley where they had Darkstalkers in the arcade. And the cool thing about this character is in the arcades, they would always play some like random like, scenes or moments from like, just characters fighting each other. Right. And I will never forget John Talbane. I didn't know him at the time, but like this character appeared on screen, and his little fighting intro before the round starts is he kind of like holds his head like he's in pain or he has a headache or whatever. He's like bothered. Yeah. And then he just transforms into a werewolf, and it's so like well animated, like it's like pixel art style, and it like has so much detail, and his like tail explodes out a certain way. And like I will never forget leaving that bowling alley And that was just on my mind. I could not stop thinking about that character.
Yeah.
So then fast forward to discovering Spunky, and then they did a lot of like John Talbot art. And I remember trying to basically look at their art, reference it, and just draw that.
Okay.
And that was like my very, very first furry art, I would say. Like, I don't think I remember drawing any other like anthro characters or anything like that before then. So, so start from there, and then fast forward to, I'd probably say transfer, and then discovering Kuma's art back then. Kuma was actually my gateway into Fur Affinity because they linked their FA account.
Oh, nice.
I had no idea what FA was. I didn't even know the term furry at the time because I think I was still in like middle school, maybe even like high school when I was learning about this. But you know, discover FA. I'm like, oh, cool, another like website with like transformation art. Awesome. And then I think I just started kind of like, you know, browsing from there and discovering a little bit more about like, you know, people's characters, and then trying to draw myself as like a cat boy, because like I used to be like super diehard weeb way back in like middle school, high school, and I was like obsessed with like cat boys and all that stuff. So I remember trying to draw myself as a cat at some point, and then the rest kind of started going from there. So those are more like my roots about like drawing myself or drawing furry art.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And honestly, I love that you also found Fur Affinity through transfer, because I feel like not only was that my experience, I feel like there's a lot of people who are into TF who found like transfer or a transformation website and then found furry. And it's always interesting because, you know, we're kind of grouped under the furry subcategory. And I mean, like a lot of us now call ourselves furries too, but it's like, no, we had a different gateway that then led us to furry. It wasn't furry leading us to other things like many other folks, you know?
Very much so. I'm glad you mentioned that because you know, as the years have gone on, and I've been a part of the fandom for a very, very long time, and I feel like the beauty of finding the fandom was like we found our place of belonging with like a bunch of other weirdos, right? I feel like that's always been the specialness of it. And I feel like once you kind of find the fandom, you start to kind of like refine your circle of who you spend time with and all that stuff. And I will never forget finding the fandom, feeling like I found my place of belonging, and then still feeling like I feel like I'm missing something. Like, why do I feel like I still am not quite there? And as the years went on, I started to discover more about myself and acceptance, and then was realizing like, oh, I haven't openly fully embraced my like weird obsession with TF. Oh, that's my core, you know? And then like fast forward to now I'm like very, very intertwined with like friends who are like obsessed with TF as well, and you know, now I get to like talk to people like you and like so many other like peeps who've been like this sort of like foundation of like, you know, the TF community, because we all contribute in our own way, right?
Absolutely.
And makes it like really, really special. So I'm really happy that you mentioned that about, you know, just like how we found the fandom, and then like, you know, oh, TF was our gateway, you know?
Yeah. No, thank you. And I'll say, I completely agree. Like, I think that the transformation community in particular has such a rich tapestry of players involved. And, you know, everyone's kind of got their own corners of that quilt, so to speak. And it's so nice to see them all come together. Especially like tangibly during like furry conventions. I mean, like, you know, just to throw it out there, like I know FW is a bit of like a disaster, but it was really nice that you and Hazel like put together some sort of a TF meet and greet, because like I didn't decide to go to FWA until like a month before, and so I missed putting anything on the schedule. Yeah, so like usually if I go to a con, you know, there's going to be a meet and greet because I'm that kind of person, but that one was like such a last minute thing, and so it was really nice to like see that, and then also see like the folks who go to FWA, because it's very different from the crowd that goes to MFF or the crowd that goes to Anthrocon or the crowd that goes to Further Confusion. So, you know, it's always a nice reminder that this community is a lot broader than we often think it is. And sometimes it can feel like, oh, you know, these are just people, these are the animal people who live in my phone or my computer. But then you get to go, you know, in person and actually tangibly make those connections and meet the people that you've been friends with for a long time, get to see other people you've admired at a distance and all that good stuff. So a long way of saying, I agree. I think that there's a lot that each of us kind of bring to the TF community. And so that's why I like hearing what it was that brought people there, because it's always such a unique connection that has many overlaps with other people, but there's always something very distinctly you about how you got to where you are now, so.
Very much so. And I think, to add a little bit more onto to what you're saying, there is this sort of like specialness amongst like all the different sub communities within the fandom that I have like spent my time in. And I would like proudly and confidently say that out of all those sub communities, the transformation community is so uniquely special because everything you just mentioned about kind of like everyone contributing, and gosh, like to some degree, Azel and I talk about this all the time, how like every like person in the TF community is sort of like this, we kind of like unintentionally put them on this like pedestal of appreciation because to some degree we've seen their art they've commissioned from like way back then, or like we've seen the art they've done from way back then, or the stories that they've done, right? Because like we're all here for kind of like some samey reason, and we all have like appreciated each other's work or contributions to that degree, and it's just really, really cool to see,
Yeah, no, I completely agree as well. And, speaking of like things that make our stories unique, I know we haven't talked about it yet, but I know that you have also gone very much into kind of streaming, and that's been a really big part of your most recent creative focus. So I was curious to know a little more about what inspired you to get into it, and then how you kind of started your channel off, basically.
Yeah, thank you. So for me in streaming, I actually decided to go into it because I have always been like a avidly obsessed FPS gamer since like way back when I was like first introduced to like GoldenEye and Halo and all that stuff. Because I'm a '90s kid, so I grew up on like the early day shooters. And at one point with specifically Call of Duty 4, I was starting to dip my toes into competitive gaming during that. And I had some awesome opportunities back then that I unfortunately missed out on because my parents didn't want to support competitive gaming, which understandably so in that time wasn't anywhere to the level it is now.
No, definitely not.
So I didn't get the support then. And then fast forward, like, gosh, like 15 years later, I was sitting very, very well at my last job. I was like kind of doing some number crunching, and then I'd finally just built my like first really, really good gaming PC. And the sort of idea hit me when I came across a streamer slash competitive player by the name of Shroud. I remember seeing him and his gameplay and thinking like, wow, is this like how I can watch the best of the best? I didn't know this was a thing, and I remember thinking streaming was like kind of a joke at the time. Like, oh, I'll never like go into that. I'll never, who makes, money and a living off of that? This and like, and I used to think that way. And then, fast forward to then I end up like saying, yeah, you know what? I think I want to pursue competitive gaming. I want to see where this journey goes because I never got to do that. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I love advocating, live your life to the fullest, pursue the things that bring you joy and happiness, as long as it provides, some sort of like roof over your head or whatever. Like, hey, do what you love. And then I just kind of took off from there. I remember saving a lot of money to take the dive into full-time streaming. Like I kind of planned things out to where like I would have savings for like 6 months plus. And then I took the dive into full-time. I like left my job. I like dwindled it down from like full-time position to part-time position because I was like, hey, I'm doing this side gig, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually when I was like finding that I was pretty well off in streaming, that's why I made the dive into full-time, and the rest was history from there. I just kind of, I eventually got signed to a team to play Apex Legends competitively. Originally, that was actually signed to Call of Duty Black Ops 4, but then that game, ended up shifting into Apex. And thankfully, I got to play in a lot of tournaments, and I made a pretty hefty amount of revenue just from playing that game competitively, which is pretty awesome. But yeah, that's how that whole journey went down into streaming full time. So, and now I'm like 6 years deep full time, I think.
No, which is awesome. And I gotta say, one of the things that's really cool to hear about is like how you like planned to have your entry. And I feel like a lot of people, especially folks who are like and this is maybe an external perspective, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there's a lot of
Yeah.
external folks who are like, oh, I just want to like go and do streaming full time, but they don't necessarily think about like A, what they're going to kind of like focus on, or B, like how do I financially plan for this endeavor if it
Yes.
doesn't go the way I want it. And I feel like you taking those steps is part of the reasons why you then later had the success that you did, because you planned for it in a way that was very thoughtful.
I think you hit the head on the nail pretty well, especially in like current day, because since COVID happened after, there's been like a big boom of streaming.
Oh yeah.
And very much I don't disagree with what you're saying, because I think one of the common questions I do get, like how do I go full time, or like do you have advice for like how to go full time?
Mhm.
And there have definitely been quite a few folks who have just taken the leap of faith, without doing that like kind of big planning, or
Yeah.
they maybe don't like save as much. And to each their own, right? Like
Of
everyone's journey
course.
is different, but I can with full confidence say that like saving as much as you can is always like the key factor.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I guess then as the contrast, I mean, I'm sure you get a lot more enjoyment out of this endeavor than you did maybe your past job, but were there
Yeah.
any like differences between the two that you didn't anticipate for and you were kind of surprised by?
Oh, between like streaming and my last job,
Yeah.
or yeah, I would definitely say I knew that going into streaming was going to be a very, very difficult journey.
Mhm.
I even remember back then, before I had like fully understood some parameters of it, that like, man, this is gonna be a hard job. Like it's gonna be kind of like
Yeah.
tireless off the clock, on and off the clock, I mean. And that's just kind of like endless. Like you don't really have like a clock out.
Yeah.
So I knew all that going in, but like I would say the things that like kind of caught me off guard, but like quite did, it was just like eye openers, I guess is the best way of putting it, is I preach this every single day, is taxes. Taxes is probably like the
Oh God, yeah.
most painful thing about being your own self-employed person.
Mhm.
So taxes has definitely been one, and then really just like kind of the internal guilt of like when you are not quote unquote working,
Right. Yeah.
that there's just like, if you're a workaholic and you just love to just be proud of your work ethic and everything, like
Mhm.
it's pretty easy to guilt trip yourself. So
Yeah. No, absolutely. I find that that's the like other side of being your own boss. It's like you're your own boss, but it's also you're your own boss. Like
yeah.
you take on both the I am the, person who's working on stuff, and also the internal like, okay, well, I'm also my boss and I need to make sure I'm doing X, Y, Z. And
Yeah.
I think
No.
that's such a great point related to that kind of almost guilt sometimes you might feel. I think that
Mm,
it's something that like it can eat away at so many different like creative endeavors. And like I've definitely seen artists who like to use that as an example, who like they go in on like doing commissions and then they
mm,
completely like burn out on it because they're pushing themselves too hard, or they're not really
yeah.
like taking it at a pace that's sustainable.
Yeah.
And so then I guess then my follow-up question to that would be, how do you work to make sure that it is sustainable for you?
So it's a very good question, because I do feel like when it comes to sustainability, especially in like something like streaming, you kind of have to put your foot down, and at least this is what I do. So I kind of try to apply this like generally, but put your foot down and tell yourself like when you need to kind of like realize that like, okay, maybe you're not sustaining with this anymore, and that's a-okay. Like you have to think about
Yeah.
other options. But I do remember telling myself, if I ever dip below a certain sub count or a certain amount of income, that you need to kind of be realistic with yourself and start exploring other options, not necessarily like throw in the towel entirely, because like I think the beauty of doing, in this case, streaming, or if you're doing any sort of other content, like you're doing arts or
Yeah.
commission work or anything like that,
Yeah.
I think it's still really, really awesome to say, okay, I may not be able to sustain it full time or like completely, but I can still do it even on the side, like it's not
Yeah,
like an,
exactly.
oh, we're done.
Yeah.
And I actually, funny you mentioned the question, because as of right now, I actually 2 months ago took up a part-time office job that was a Monday through Friday,
Oh.
stable hours, which is exactly what I was looking for,
Mhm.
because now I have someone in my life who I absolutely love, and I want to do life adventures and just spend more time with them and stuff. And I was kind of looking at the grand scheme of the picture and it was like, well, I'm no longer a single person. I have
Mhm.
someone else in my life. I would like to make more money, like
Yeah.
if I was living that single lifestyle, then like sure, what I'm still doing is fine. But like I want to like travel. I want to like
Yeah.
commission more work, which is, kind of, where I was looking at like a lot of realizations of like, yeah, I would like to make more
Yeah.
money on top of what I've been doing,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just kind of like where I draw the line really is just sustainability and then like what your kind of happiness levels are.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. And I think that it's a good reminder as well for folks. Because again, I think sometimes people have a bit like unrealistic expectations in terms of what they can expect. And it's always
Yeah.
a push and pull of what works best for me. And also what can I like take on from like an enjoyment and a tolerance kind of perspective. So, and I guess, one of the things I've always found interesting, especially given like your focus is more like on FPSs and stuff. I mean, obviously, it's well known that you're also someone who's involved in like transformation spaces, even though your streaming space isn't as focused on it. So I was curious how those two pieces end up like intersecting a lot in like kind of your streaming and like your online presence and interacting with other people.
Oh man, I love this question because it is actually a constant kind of internal battle I have with myself
Hmm.
because as I was mentioning like earlier, I very much advocate like live your life to the fullest, but also
Yeah.
like, you know, advocate your happiness too.
Hmm.
Um I constantly have had this struggle from like when I was playing competitively to now doing what I'm, where I'm at right now with my content, which is when I was networking myself amongst other professional players and just other very, very like talented gamers, the competitive gaming space, as many of us know or may not know, is not as openly diverse as we would wish it
No.
could be. There's a lot of, unfortunately, there's a lot of like anti like LGBTQ peeps, a lot of people who are just like they hold a lot of like I don't want to say hate, but there's just a lot of like non-acceptance for like
Oh
diversity.
yeah.
And so I for one point I had to kind of like reel back my furriness and sort of my weirdness, but had to remind myself like, hey, you know what? If you were at work at like your old company or at some other company, you'd probably still be doing the same, right? Like not letting it all fly out, like just
Yeah.
maybe reel it back in that sort of scope where like you're just thinking about it from a work perspective. It
Hmm.
helped me a lot back then.
Yeah.
But as of right now, I'm not playing competitively. I took a good hard look in the mirror and was like, well, if you're not representing like an org or a team or a brand or anything like that, who's to say that like you shouldn't be letting your kind of weirdness fly? So
Exactly.
as of right now, I've been kind of like figuring out this sort of balance where like, yes, I'm still focusing very heavily on like FPS and like, trying to like express like skill
Hmm.
and all these things, but like I'm also trying to like find a nice delicate balance where like, hey, come one, come all. If
Yeah.
you are a fellow TF enjoyer, if you guys love werewolves, if you're a furry, hey, this is a space for you, Like I'm trying to figure out that like way of expressing that because like that is kind of who I am. That's my core,
Hmm.
At the end of the day, is like I am a weirdo. I am a TF obsessed, like, kind of guy. And I'm trying to like always brainstorm some fun ways of like advocating that. And like right now I have like a TF bot command that's just been like a little RNG like exclamation mark TF in the chat, and then you get TF'd in a random thing, and it's like a little silly thing, but like it's still like a way of being like, hey,
Yeah.
TF. But I'm always brainstorming ways, of like dipping my toes into that, but also not like going full all out to where I'm like deterring people who are like maybe still trying to figure out their balance, Maybe people are
Yeah.
like not quite there where you and I are, where we're like openly TF
Yeah. Exactly.
happy and proud, and they're like kind of coming out slowly. So
Yeah. And just to add on to that, I think one of the things that like that balance you mentioned, like completely agree in terms of how you framed it in terms of like, especially when you were doing like more competitive stuff, like there's other considerations, work considerations, etc. Now you
yeah,
have more
yeah,
like of an ability to balance it the way you want it to. I
yeah,
always find that for people who are kind of entering the space, that's often one of their biggest concerns in terms of like, how open can I be about these things? And so
right,
when they do get to see people who like are streaming or whatever, who are like engaging with it to some degree while putting it alongside their other kind of pursuit. I always think
Mm,
that that's a really good kind of like leading by example sort of thing, in the sense of like it's not something that we should necessarily feel like we have to hold back. Obviously, time and place, there's settings
mm,
that you're not going to, but especially in the more like community focused spaces or the spaces that we're making our own,
mm.
yes, you can balance this thing against whatever else it is that you're pursuing. And I find that for a lot of folks in the TF space, when we look at people who are like doing things, they're just doing stuff with TF,
Yeah.
which again is totally fine. Like I I support that. That's me. But also,
Yeah.
when you get to see someone who's balancing it against someone else, I find that there is a really nice kind of like psychological impact in terms of, oh, this is not just something I have to relegate and silo into this one box in my life. It is something that
Mm.
can kind of cross appeal to other areas if work to balance it correctly.
I agree. I agree. I mean, I think you hit the nail pretty hard with that, with, this sort of balance. And I feel like
Hmm.
because we're all at different places in our lives and our careers and whatever other factors, tie into that, I think the balance is always going to differ from person to person. Not, some people just don't quite fully understand the gravity and the complexity of like how open can one be versus like how close does one have to be because of like all eyes on them, or like it
Yeah.
doesn't matter, you know what I mean? Hence, the creation of AD accounts and alternate
Yeah.
accounts,
Yeah.
just ways of expressing. So that's a whole other thing too.
Oh yeah, no, it absolutely is. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. But I guess like to that point of, like people kind of interacting and seeing the ways you're like balancing the two spaces, would you
Mm.
say that like in terms of your kind of streaming platform now and like your channel and such, have you been engaged in some sort of like deliberate community building, or is that something that's kind of happened ad hoc as you've kind of just continued to do what you do and stream various different SPS shooters and such?
You know, uh, I would say it's been kind of jumping like throughout the years. I would say it's kind of jumped around, where it's sort of like this recreating or like rebalancing kind of what the community is and how it sort of is a reflection of like my values at the time. And I say that because like when I was playing competitively, the foot traffic I used to get on my channel was like, a bunch of viewers who are like there for the
Hmm.
competitive life and there to like watch the game be played at the like highest level and everything like that. And then like, when I started VTubing, because believe it or not, I actually started my streaming journey with my IRL cam. And then eventually
Yeah.
I started delving into VTubing back before VTubing even blew up, which I think was also kind of like pre or like after COVID.
Oh yeah.
So then, like, when I started VTubing, I started getting a lot more kind of like furry viewers. And then when I started IRL camming again, it kind of became this blend of the two.
Yeah.
Now that I'm like being very, very upfront and like vocal about like, TF even more, and they're like, oh, I'm a werewolf now and this and that. Like, I feel
Yeah.
like it's been kind of attracting like a new dynamic of like my streaming community. And I'm like very,
Okay.
very grateful for it. So it's been
Yeah.
really interesting to see how the community kind of changes and reflects like again like who I am at that moment and what
Mhm.
I kind of want to drive the content as,
Yeah.
it's been very interesting.
No, and that totally makes sense to me. We often attract to ourselves, the folks who find either, I guess what's the word? Who find like similarities in what's being displayed or aspiration towards what's being displayed. And so it makes sense that as you've kind of like shifted around a little bit, as a werewolf is wont to do, you've
Mm.
kind of changed up how people or like the groups of people who then end up kind of glumping onto that. But
Yeah.
I will say, like it's always interesting I always like asking that sort of a question, because I feel like, especially if you're like a streamer, I feel like you have to put a lot more thought into like what kind of audience you're attracting. And like, to be clear,
Right.
artists have to do that all the time too. I'm not like, I think about that all the time too. But like
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
with art, it's also like, I feel like you have a bit more leeway than you do necessarily with like, again, depending on what your overall goals are. But like with
Hmm.
streaming in particular, it's like, people are actually live watching you play something. So it's like, well, how do I make sure that they're interested? What kind of groups of people am I cultivating? So I feel like you have to be a lot more thoughtful in terms of how you approach that. So it's interesting
Very
to hear
much.
that thought in terms of like how you've been approaching it.
Yeah. I think right now we're actually in this very special age of streaming where, for one, the furry streaming community has blown up. I
Oh yeah.
remember when it was just like only like a very small handful of streamers at the time, and now it is like so many people stream in the fandom. And I say it's a special time because of how many furry streamers there are. Now we have the little sub communities existing in the streaming space, and
Yeah.
now I am seeing a big, well, not big, but like I'm starting to see an influx of transformation focused streamers. You
Yes.
have someone like Azel, who's now doing like TF art on Twitch, and then
Mhm.
forgive me if I'm not mentioning like a bunch of others that exist in the space, but like I know for a fact that like Team Thunderfang is actually the stream team that Pocat and a few others have banded together to create on
Mhm.
Twitch, which is originally at the core a bunch of TF enjoyers and
Yes.
streamers, and now it has started to branch into like, okay, the core is TF, but now it's just kind of like capturing like everyone who's like a furry or like remotely interested in TF. And I just
Yeah.
think it's such a cool thing, and that's only just one little pocket. Like there's obviously probably so many other little like TF friendos in there too, but I just think it's really really cool, and it's what has inspired me and pushed me to want to be kind of more like TF focused with my
Yeah.
content now, because hey, we have our little community that's started to form.
No, I love that. And it's funny to me also because I full disclosure, I wasn't as like in streaming spaces until a bit more recently, and so
Mhm.
I had very much like a millennial, almost like, oh, that's cute, that's what the kids are doing these days type thing. And so I mentioned this story because it was so funny to me. There was someone from Thunderfang. I think
Mhm.
it was Paco at one of
Oh
our
yeah.
meet and greets came up and was like, "Oh, we want to have a Thunderfang area," and I was
Yeah.
like, "Okay, like we can like have that, I guess." And I was like, "Is that like the streaming group that like the people who are into like Pokemon TF are in?" And he was like, "Oh no, it's way broader than that." And I was like, "Okay, I mean, hey, look, you're telling me that, I believe you." But I remember
Yeah.
when I first heard the term, I was like, "Oh, that sounds like a Pokemon team name." And I know a lot of people who are into TF are into that. It must just be like streamers who like Pokemon TF. I don't know, like, And so that was my assumption. And so, anyways, I've learned since that it's broader than that. But I always thought
I
that was
love that. It brings
cool.
it brings so much joy to hear that, because I am very much in the same category of like generation, and I definitely feel like I have a lot of moments nowadays where I'm just like, oh, is that what the cool kids are doing, or like
Like, okay, I guess
not
it's
knowing
streaming
what it.
thing. I have my sister is about 5 years younger than me, so she very much keeps me on my toes. She keeps me young, as I like to say. And so
Yeah.
I remember at one point, when this was many years ago, I was like, "Oh, there's all this like streaming stuff going on," and she was like, "Yeah, so I'm already like subscribed to 2 Twitch channels, and this is how it works." And I was like, "Thank you for bringing me along. Just as I brought you along to Neopets when you were perhaps too young to understand its cultural importance, you are now bringing me along to streaming, I guess." So
Oh yes, how the turn have tables.
exactly. And I take special pleasure in saying that she's still a Neopets player to this day. She's a real one there. So
Oh, that's
um,
awesome. That's really really cool too, because I do have a younger sister, and she's 4 years younger than me, so we're both
oh,
very
nice.
similar in that sort of fashion.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you want to get on to another topic? But before I move off this one, I will ask a final question. What advice
Yeah.
do you have for people who are interested in getting into streaming?
Oh man, so for anyone getting interested into streaming, I know we kind of like talked a little bit about it earlier, but like I cannot emphasize it enough. My biggest question that I always get is like, hey, if I were to go in streaming, what advice can you give? And it always delves into two paths, which is one, do you want to do it for fun? Or two,
Yeah.
do you want to make a career out of it? And I feel like those two questions need to be answered truthfully and honestly, because they heavily determine sort of the general scope and pathing that you end
Mm,
up taking on that
yeah.
journey. And regardless of what answer anyone goes with, there always has to be a sort of like good look in the mirror and being very very honest with yourself and saying like, hey, even if I am doing this for fun, what kind of content do I want to do? What
Yeah.
do I love to do? And that's what brings it to the next point of advice, which is like rule number one is always have fun. If you are not having fun, who wants to watch someone hit a live button and not have fun? Right?
Yeah.
It's infectious. So that's my always my rule number one. Rule number two is if you do decide to go down the path of making a career out of it, you need to take a good hard look at your financial situation, sort of that like that push and stopping point.
Yeah.
Look at your finances, look at the sort of like impact it's going to have on you, your life, those around you care about, because the realistic factor is that once you delve into full-time streaming or content, you have to make a lot of sacrificial, nights, days,
Yeah.
weeks, and it takes a toll on the social life. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But if you are a-okay with knowing all that and accepting, those parameters, then, hey, go all in on it. And I would say my last piece of advice is, along with the sort of realistic expectations, also be realistic with yourself and your goals and what you deem as success, because it kind of ties into sort of 1 and 2, which is if you are having fun with it, if you are proud of the work that you're putting in and you feel like you're contributing something that makes you feel happy,
Yeah.
then awesome. Hey, go all out with it. You're cut out for this thing. And if not, maybe take a good look at like what it is that interested you in the first place, right? Like what sort of values do you appreciate about streaming, and how do you want to contribute to that grander picture of what you're trying to convey to others. So it's kind of my big pro tip.
Awesome. No, that is good advice, and I hope that folks who are considering it take it to heart. Because, yeah, I mean the financial angle is such an important part, right? Like you got to be able to support yourself,
Yeah.
if that's the angle you want to take, And if you want to do it for fun, then that's fine too. Just set realistic goals, I guess. So
Yeah. Realistic goals for sure. Be very realistic.
yeah. Oh man. Well, I know we kind of talked about it a little bit at the start before we went into the streaming, but you're both an artist and someone who's frequently commissioned a lot of transformation art. So I guess to start with, we talked a little bit about how you kind of got into drawing and particularly like, the catboy angle.
Mhm.
When it came to drawing transformation art in particular, did you have any like big inspirations that maybe we haven't talked about that helped you get into it besides like, seeing like Foxy stuff or Kuma stuff or what have you? And like, was there any sort of kind of long-term goals you kind of had when you were starting to get into drawing transformation art?
This is such a difficult question for me because there are so many inspirations from way back then to like even the present. I do this very bad thing where I kind of like suck at thinking on the spot. So forgive me if I don't accurately mention those that inspired me. But I would definitely say that in terms of like inspirational like moments and like TF scenes and all that kind of,
Hmm.
I mean, the two dead giveaways that like have kind of driven who I am in like my transformation life have always been the Pleasure Island scene in Pinocchio,
Yes.
and then American Werewolf in London. And then I would actually say a third one to throw into there that has kind of come up a lot more in recent times has been the Jumanji transformation of
Oh,
Peter
yes.
to a monkey. Like
Yes.
those three have like played in my head my entire life.
That
And
one's pretty seminal.
yeah. I only mention like those sort of movie scenes or media because I have always thought about them when I've like referenced sort of like transformation arts and things that I want to draw, especially when I started like drawing TF art myself. I will never forget, like I grew up in this awesome room that had a like full mirror on both sliding doors of my closet.
Oh,
And so when
okay.
I would reference different like positions or like let's say my body, for example,
Yeah.
I would do the funny thing of like I'd pose a certain way, I'd hold my own flip phone camera up, and then I'd like take a picture of my hand, or like I'd look at like the mirror a certain way and try to snap a picture of that and just try to
Yeah.
reference it. So I would say like those are kind of like my earlier days of like how I would do that. And then like, and again, without mentioning like any specific like artists come to
Mhm.
mind, I mean, there's just so many like TF artists I would always think of when doing these pieces on top of like, the TF scenes. And then
Oh
I'd be
yeah.
like, okay, well, what makes me feel funny? What makes me feel good when I'm like posing this way? I want to draw that, or I want to like convey that. So those are at least like some things that come to mind when thinking back to like this sort of inspirational pieces of doing TF art earlier.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think, there's the names are too many to mention, so I fully get you there. And I think the concept of like referencing oneself and then kind of trying to use that to create, your various art pieces, as someone who basically started with photo manipulation, that very much resonates with me.
Oh man, yeah, you mentioned photo manip. That is, I'm so sorry to cut you off there. You just brought up like a really, really special part of like, the subject, which is photo manipulation. And
Mhm.
I like you doing the photo manips that you do nowadays. Like photo manips have always tickled a very special part of my brain where,
Mhm.
yes, TF art is beautiful and always been kind of the core, but I will never forget first coming across like TF manips and being just completely floored and speechless about them. And I used to actually be in a old Yahoo group for donkey transformation.
Yes. Yes. I was there too.
Oh, you were there too. Oh, that's awesome. So I don't know if you recall then HMH.
Yes.
What's their numbers, like 45 2002 or something?
Yep.
Yeah. They're actually a longtime buddy of mine. I haven't chatted with them in a while, but
I feel like saying that sequence of numbers is like a sleeper cell activation for any Donkey TF fan, because
yep.
like every single one knows, like, oh no, I know exactly what the username was from the Yahoo group and from like, DeviantArt. I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yes.
He did art of me a number of times actually. Like back in the day when it was still like TF World or TF Spot or whatever.
Mm,
He did a few pictures of me, and then there was actually a longer sequence that we never ended up finishing, but
mm.
we did back in the day also. I think I got like the concept was like I got a medal in the mail from Pleasure Island or something. But
Oh,
anyways.
yes. That's awesome. Well, we'll have to exchange some sometime because like I also have like quite a few. I think I have two sequences and then like a few single or yeah, there's like a few singles sprinkled in there, all from
Yeah,
him. I just think it's really really funny when now there's like so many Telegram groups and
yeah.
I've been poked from a few friends who are in those that are like, hey, your donkey sequence like popped up in there again. I'm like, oh my god, it's still floating around. That's awesome. So I love that you're doing manip stuff.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I've said it many times on this podcast, but I've often felt like it's a bit of a dying art form, and I am also stubborn. So I will not give it. They will take it from my cold dead hands, essentially. And I think that there's
Yeah.
something even like this is a very much a tangent, so I apologize. But you
No.
know,
Go on. Go on. I love hearing that.
thank you. One of the things I often despaired about, like maybe 2 years back, was a lot of the AI stuff, because it felt like that was like the death knell for photo manipulation.
Yeah.
In that, like, people were trying to generate these photorealistic stuff. I mean, my art got like scraped for them and whatnot, and it is what
Mm,
it is. But
mm,
one of the things I think about is how not only am I still interested, obviously, in doing photo manipulation, I've been doing it for over a decade and a half, but
mm.
I find that there's still people who are interested in even like commissioning it. And that's the thing that really took me by surprise at first, because I was like, well, why would anyone want to commission this now? Because you can get something that's pretty close by just, punching some words into an AI generator. But it was
Yeah.
really heartening to see that people still felt like, no, there is a unique connection here. And also, it's uniquely me. Like I know that the picture you're working with is myself that I
Yeah.
took, and that is a very unique connection that can never be replicated. And
Mm,
so, if anything, I've felt a bit more hopeful in the sense of I don't think it's going to have like some big renaissance of coming back, but I
yeah.
still feel at least that I can continue to make my art in a way that is joyful, I guess, and not
Yeah.
like kind of have this specter of like, oh, well, something else could do it like me. It's like, well, maybe they could, but
Mm,
I'm also making art as not only self-expression, but I'm also giving joy to people who are still interested in commissioning it. And so I feel like I had to like kind of work through a lot of those like doldrums in my thoughts before I was able to like come back out on the other side and be like, no, I still want to do this there's
Yeah.
something for me, and there's something that other people still want to see, and that helps keep me going, kind of. So
I'm glad. It makes me very, very happy to hear you say this, because like I myself would tell you, like, please do not stop doing photo manipulation art. Like
yeah.
I am also very much not just like an enjoyer, but like I am like so obsessively into photo manipulation art,
Mhm.
TF art, and like you do like such a very, very special thing by still providing that into that sphere. And I cannot stress enough to any other photo TF manipulation artists out there, please do not stop doing it. Like, because people like me love it, we appreciate it, and also very much want to commission it too. Like, no matter like how hard you yourself, Zill, or anyone else out there are on themselves, we enjoy it. So that's my PSA to like keep going. Don't stop providing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I will say that I'm very thankful that Blue Sky is like a space where I can still post it, because FA has some very silly rules about
Yeah.
what they count as photography nudity, which is hilarious because, especially
Really?
at this point, yeah, like at this
Huh.
point right now, so much of my art is like it's blending between like traditional liquify tools and painting over. There's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
almost nothing left from original pictures, but FA is still like, oh, if that's a dick and it looks like it's in a picture,
yeah.
well, we think it's a picture of a dick. And I'm like, it's not though. I like, that's fully painted. And they're like, we don't care. Like, you're not allowed to post that. So they have rules about like the level of clothing you need to wear in a picture to post for affinity. So the
Really?
fun fact I'll give is that when I make like safe for work alts on Fur Affinity, there's like a pair of gym shorts that I will put over the picture, and that's my
Mhm.
way of getting around their rules. So if you
Yeah.
see a picture and then there's just shorts on top, that's why they're there. And I'm like, you can find the full thing on my Blue Sky, but like that's why I have to put gym shorts on everything, which is just, it's very funny. So
Well, one, that's clever, and two, I find it very hilarious that will still get flagged even when you're wearing shorts, because
yeah.
whoever looks at it, or if they have some bot regulating that, dictates that as like, nope, that's nudity. It's like,
Yeah.
no, they're wearing shorts, but you can believe what you want.
No, it's crazy to me. Like I had this whole like argument back and forth with someone one time because they took down, again, I've never posted anything like explicit to Fur Affinity, but there were older pieces where I was only wearing underwear potentially, and they were like, no, you have to take that down. And I'm like, okay, all
Oh,
right, cool, great. But anyways, very long tangent.
that's so funny. No, it was a good tangent. It's a good tangent.
Well, thank you. Well, I know that, you're also someone who, like me, has done a lot of art commissioning as well. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
I remember seeing your stuff. I think the first time I saw some of your stuff, it was like the red bandana that I really like keyed into. And I was like, okay, making a mental note, I'm going to see more art of this person. I know now it's the
Mhm.
same person over and over. I guess my question is, because I've grappled with this too, when you started like commissioning TF art, was it a way to supplement your own self creation, or was there something else at play?
It was definitely both. It
Mm,
was very much the self supplementation, and then I would say it was like kind of a lot of other little factors that kind of like built upon themselves to basically
yeah.
just perpetuate this whole way I wanted to express, kind of like how we do in furry, where like our OC is the way that we see ourselves.
Yeah.
TF art was always a way that I wanted to express who I am. Which I know is kind of silly in itself, because transformation is the process and you're not
Yeah.
fully there. But I feel like transformation in its sort of like complexity is, hey, you're expressing things about yourself because these are things that you like about transformation and make you who you are. And
Exactly.
I think it's always the beauty, like you were saying, where like you can see a piece of attire, or someone has their human character or their self,
Yeah.
wearing an iconic outfit, and your transformation brain immediately is just like, I know who that is. I think that is such a special thing, because that all ties into the whole like way that we express ourselves through transformation art, where it's like, yeah, the enjoyment is the process, but we can still be picked out who we are, to
Yeah.
those that are also enjoyers within the community. And I think that is so special that that is actually a thing.
Yeah.
Um, so it's definitely a blend of those two things kind of coinciding with each other because, the beauty factors of fine tuning or honing in on the elements of TF that we really enjoy. I do also feel like from a concept manner, I love that there are certain body part transformations that we could be like, oh, that's that person. Oh,
Yes.
they love tail explosions. Oh, that's that person. Oh, they love their snout growing. Oh, that's that person. You know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah.
always really, really cool to be able to see and know that. And yeah, it's definitely those two coinciding with each other.
Mhm. I gotta ask, how did you settle on the red bandana being one of your calling cards?
Oh, I love that because I don't think I've talked about that in quite some time because like I think
Oh,
my favorite piece to go on about with like some TF artists I've worked with over the years was like, oh, like we chit chat about like the commission piece, the details, and then like, oh, like we start like going into more personal talk and it's like, oh, what does the red bandana mean? The red bandana is because me being the weeb that I am, I have also been a very, very big fashion head.
mhm.
And I've always just loved very, very big, like scarves, long tattered scarves.
Oh,
I've
yeah.
loved bandanas around the neck. And I would actually wear the red bandana around my neck a lot IRL.
Okay.
And also, I'd wear it on my fursuit a lot. I also just like thought that bandanas look so, so cute on like dogs, animals, whatever.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, I just like adapted red because red's my favorite color. And I was like, well, if I put that on myself, my human self, I can make that my little piece of attire that will like always
Yeah.
be there when I'm like getting TF art or something like that. So that's what that means to me, at least from that special manner.
No, that's awesome. And I always think about this because like there's some folks who are who have always like said like, okay, there's a specific item that it's always going to be in the pictures of me transforming. So it's again an easy way to know who's who. And then there's the folks who have taken the more route of like, I don't have something specific, et cetera, et cetera. And I fall more into the latter camp. I
Yeah.
mean, outside of like my glasses really. But it's interesting because I find there's like a dichotomy of on the one hand, if you have something distinctive, you always know it's going to be that like that's you in that piece. On the
Yeah.
other hand, if you don't have something distinctive, maybe you have an easier way of like self inserting yourself into other pictures that maybe look kind of like you. But I
Hmm.
feel like both of them are like really interesting approaches that speak to like our level of like the level of connection we want to have with like the pieces that then get produced and such. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but
Yes.
I just thought that.
No, oh my gosh, I think you explained it so well because, like you said, self insertion is such a very special part of like looking at TF art where it's like,
Mhm.
cool, like, am I this subject here? Right.
Yeah.
But I do also feel like sometimes when there are a lot of elements that sort of hit your buttons,
Yeah.
you can kind of self insert in that sort of way. As long as like maybe even there's like not too much of a like distinction between, who that human subject is versus like how you actually are, right?
Yeah.
I definitely can say that like I've had a lot more difficulty with that,
Mhm.
identifying like what is that like key accessory or shirts or outfit or whatever in
Yeah.
current art that I commission because like the present me doesn't wear a red bandana anymore. I kind of consider that or associate that with like my older version of myself. And now I'm like struggling to figure out like what is that iconic piece that I want to like put onto like my OC or like myself or
Yeah.
whatever. So it's a struggle. I don't know what it is quite yet, but I'm
Yeah.
figuring it out.
It's tough. I mean, you do have the red collar for your werewolf, so that's
That is
something at
true.
least. I saw it at the first time. I was like, "Oh, is that like the bandana being transformed into something more appropriate?" I don't know, but
Oh, I like that idea, because that you might have cooked on something because I love the concept of like your outfit changing to fit the character. Like that
yes,
is a huge
yes.
button pusher for me.
It's
So
so good. Oh my god, especially
yeah.
with the character TF2. I love that stuff. So,
Oh yeah.
but yeah, no, it's something I've thought about before too because I mean, at this point like I've grown out my hair a lot since I like started commissioning art. So,
Mhm.
I my I guess what's the word I'm looking for? My compromise was that I also generally get it with it in a ponytail. So it's kind of easy to be like, oh, well, my old art is just you couldn't see the longer hair. But,
Yeah.
I've always thought that, like, the calling card thing specifically was something I thought about a lot at the beginning.
Mhm.
And I ended up not going down that route. And sometimes I regret it. But sometimes, like you kind of said, people have just made those connections to what you like anyway. So, like,
Yeah.
like someone will be like, oh, pool toy TF, that's probably Zill, and like stuff like that. So I think that's a fun way to kind of circle back around and be like, okay, maybe I didn't necessarily pick something, but at the same time, people know what you're into. They know roughly what you look like. They're
Yeah.
gonna figure it out who it is, So
I do love that you mentioned that too with like your ponytail or your hair, because you actually reminded me that like that has always been a key factor is your hairstyle. And I have like gone through, I think like in my time of commissioning TF art, I want to say I have like gone through 4 or 5 different hairstyles that I've commissioned in my art. But yet when I look at the art, I myself can like look at it and be like, okay, like I know that's me and I feel that
yeah.
connection that that's me. But I always wonder, like, I wonder if anyone else knows that that's me, And it's just always one of those wonders.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. And I often wonder how people track that or what they think of the kind of changes in the hairstyles and commission pieces and
Yeah.
such. So
Yeah. I try to go with like some sort of hairstyle that can be like an in between of
yeah.
like whatever phase I'm going through with like my hairstyle at the time or whatever.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to go. I guess then, like, we've talked about, your self creation with art, the art you've kind of commissioned. Have you had periods where you felt like you only worked on like one or the other? And were there any kind of like factors that really led to that sort of focus in those time periods?
Yeah, I'd actually say a recent sort of like situation like that is since like going into full-time streaming, I unfortunately haven't really had as much time or mind focus to do art the way that I used to, because there
Hmm.
was actually a pretty good chunk of time where I was doing art pretty consistently.
Yeah.
Albeit it wasn't transformation art, unfortunately, but um, since going into streaming full time, it's been like this constant battle of like I'm very, very ADHD, like I'm 10 on the
Yeah.
scale, like for sure. So I'm
Yes.
either like I'm all in or I'm all out. And because I'm so all in on like, man, I need to perform really well on the games that I'm playing, my brain is constantly like, okay, study mode, for that video
Yeah.
game or study mode for this. And then like when the day is like coming to an end, I'm like and looking through TFR and I'm like, oh, I'm so inspired right now, but I'm so tired, And so I've been like unfortunately on the side of commissioning arts, and even then I haven't commissioned as much art because like financially, like I'm like
Yeah.
trying to like shift things around to where I can start commissioning again. But I still sprinkle in like a few commission pieces here and there, and I would like to do more TF art. Like I
Oh,
like to
yeah.
be blunt. The current me is very much trying to find a balance between still streaming,
Hmm.
but now delving into doing TF art. And I'd be lying if I didn't admit that my boyfriend is my big inspiration for wanting to do more TF art, because like we sit in the same room together when we're
Yeah.
both working, and I'll like constantly look over his shoulder, I'll see what he's working on, and I'm just like, man, I just want to sit here and do TF art with you. I just want to be a weirdo and just draw things I don't care about, and let the freak flag fly.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, he
Trying
does
to get
amazing
there.
stuff. He does amazing
Yeah.
stuff. So I can see why that's inspiring.
Yeah, I'm surrounded by a lot of talented, peeps like you included.
Oh,
It's
thank
always
you.
very inspiring when I see like, I'll like load up Blue Sky and I'll just see like TFTuesday art posts, or like,
Yeah.
oh, work in progresses. I'm just like, oh, I just want to do weird art and I don't want to care anymore. So I'm on that spectrum right now. That I'm figuring it out, figuring it out.
No, that's good. And I think everything is also a journey. We go through periods in our lives where certain things are more important than others. And then, I feel like there's always a kind of a longing almost of like, oh, but I could be doing the other thing. And I find that's very ADHD coded. So, because I relate
Yeah.
heavily to that.
Mhm.
But I definitely feel you there. And I think that like, I'm sure that you will find a way to get back to it. It's just a matter of working through the kind of like current period, and like once you
Exactly.
find that balance the way you want to balance it, then it will come. So
Yeah, that's what I'm telling myself. I'm like, it's okay, it's life is all about obstacles, and
Yeah.
we'll work our way through whatever obstacle it is, and then find that balance eventually, right? So,
Yeah, exactly.
hoping that I can eventually be back in the ranks of providing more TF art or content or whatever, because that makes me very happy. Like that is always like a pure joy. Is like, cool. I know that I gave something to the people that give back to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I know that obviously I'm sure when you get back to creating art of your own, a big focus will of course be werewolves, and I know that you had that kind of shift with your Sona recently too. So I know
Yeah,
we've
yeah.
talked a little bit about, like American Werewolf in London and such, but I wanted to better understand like what it was about werewolves in particular that really like gets you going, like that core nugget within them that really kind of continues that fascination outside of the media that's kind of like shown certain elements that are interesting to you.
I would say one big detail on them that has always stuck with me is I love their bestial nature.
Mm.
I don't know what it is, but like something about their and I'm thinking generally, like when I try to picture the question that you're presenting and like what it is that stands out to me about them, my brain, and maybe this describes who I am as an enjoyer of werewolves, is I think of like big bestial kind of furry figure that looks very intimidating, scary, but then you kind of go underneath that and there's still some sort of piece of potential humanity, or
Hmm.
or maybe it's just a full on beast, right? And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love that sort of conflict of like there's still that person potentially in there, but they're kind of enshrouded underneath this like just
Mm.
this beast. I absolutely love that. Like that does so many things for my brain. And then just like the general shape, like the fact that they're just like I don't know, like it can just come down to like the muzzle. I love like
Oh,
how
yeah.
like kind of like the broader figure is where like their upper half is like kind of top heavy. I like that they can be on all fours, but then they can walk bipedal. And man, it's so many things. Like I love this question because it's making me think of like the visual of having a chart, and I'm like, all right, here
Yeah.
it is. Here's the anatomy of the werewolf.
No, that's
um,
great.
so I would definitely say those things, and then like I don't know. I love the whole concept of the werewolf community has over the years from
Hmm.
like I'd say like back when we were in like our like middle school days of like
Hmm.
earlier internet to like the present now,
Yeah.
I've noticed this sort of like really, really big kind of shift in how the werewolf community has formed, and people have made their OCs like here's daytime form, here's full moon form, here's blood moon form, here's
Yeah.
like it's like all these different kind of like phases of our werewolf
Yeah.
characters. And I've like found this sort of like beauty and self-reflection and finding acceptance in myself of, hey, I like how these people are they're correlating their daytime self character with their
Yeah.
IRL self character. And I've actually, being the very, very big fashion head that I am, I've actually taken it to like falling absolutely in love with like distressed clothing to tie into my
Hmm.
werewolf character, to tie into my IRL self. And,
Yes.
and it's sort of this like, yeah, I don't know. It does a lot for like this self reflection factor of
Hmm.
like the werewolf as well. And then I just love that werewolves have always tied into like curses, spells, science.
Yeah.
They kind of tie into like everything, and they
All the
like,
triggers.
yeah, all and they're full of triggers like that. I think that's the key word that you just said. It's like they hit so many triggers, and and then they can also be conveyed so many ways too. They can be conveyed in like a horrific setting. They can be
Yep.
conveyed in a toony setting. They can be conveyed in a realistic sense. And I just love that there's sort of this like amoeba of things, but like at the very end of the day, a werewolf is always going to be known in like, folklore,
Hmm.
mythology, and yeah, I don't know. It hits on all those things.
No, it really is like an all-encompassing package, and I mean, there's a
Yeah.
reason why they're so common in, folklore and mythology across the world. Like, in so many different cultures, there are versions of werewolves. I mean, it speaks to the kind of, like, universal human like thinking about like what if, Beast. But also I find that in particular with a lot of werewolf fans, it's like what if Beast and also horny and or affirming.
Yes.
We've gotten to see in like media and such many different kind of takes on what a werewolf story could be, and I mean
Yeah.
there's definitely some that are better than others.
Yeah.
I'm glaring at you, Wolfman from Bloomhouse. Jesus.
Oh my
But
gosh,
like
yeah.
I feel like there are at least always like interesting, again, like not you, Wolfman. There's interesting takes there at least, and I think that one of the things I've always noticed when like I get to chat with folks who are into werewolves, which to be clear, I am too, very much so. But like
Mhm.
especially people who are like more focused on it, there's always like different aspects of that sort of either like, what do we like from like a nature perspective? Like, is it full beast or is there some humanity? What's the conflict? Or it's
Yeah.
like, oh, like what is the kind of overall posture? Like, is this like a bipedal werewolf? Is it a quadrupedal one? Are they like only able to like go up on like two legs for like a short period of time? How are you handling the tail? Because that's always a question. Like, how are we thinking
Yeah.
about, the ability to maybe like tell that they were said person versus like completely anonymous?
Yeah.
And like the clothing, I mean, again, there's so many different axes that you can explore them upon, and I think
Mhm.
that's part of the reason why they are such a universal kind of hallmark of transformation, and it's a reason why I think a lot of people got into transformation because of them. So I don't know, I think there's a lot to mine there, and I think you've mentioned some really good points too.
You tackled a lot of very, very, very important points as well. Actually, in my opinion, like way better than I could convey. I tend to struggle a lot with words and I'm very good visually.
That's fair.
But I think you hit on everything so well. Like you actually just mentioned something that really, really helped me for my character, my werewolf
Mhm.
character. And you were mentioning like, oh, is it like, a cross between like, is their human self still there? Or are they full on beast or whatever?
Yeah.
And a big part of the design of my werewolf character is I left a bunch of human patches on him because I wanted that element of like my IRL self to still be there, like the pigment of
Right.
my skin tone, and then also like sprucing in like or tying in a bunch of like other elements that were like inspirational, like American Werewolf in London, right? When David is transforming for the first time, there's the iconic like shot of like him when he's like screaming out in pain and him then his like
Yes.
the camera pans over and his face starts to form and push into a muzzle. That scene has stuck with me in my head my entire life, and I always wanted to capture like what was it I loved about that. And I always loved the whole design of like there's all this fur formed around his like face, but
Mhm.
then there's still this human patch that's still right in the middle of his
Right there,
face.
yeah.
And so I
Yeah,
was like, I want that on my character because I want that to still be me, but I want my muzzle to be all the way out,
yeah. Yeah.
And that's the beauty of like what you're hitting on with like werewolves is like that like what sort of like measurement on the slider are we at on the werewolf? It's like,
Yeah,
is it 100? Is it 50? And I was like, I think I want to go with like the shape is 100% werewolf, but the human skin is still there.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
god. Yeah, no, I love that, and again, there's so many fun kind of dynamics that you can play with that, and I know, like, you ended up settling on, like, either being bipedal or quadrupedal. What was kind of the thought process behind allowing yourself to experience kind of both elements? Because I know some, again, people have very strong opinions in terms of which
Yeah,
ones they
yeah.
like and such.
I would say it kind of tied into a lot of like things that I was going wild with my imagination actually on
Yeah.
how I kind of wanted him to act and function and move around. And I also like, believe it or not, I kind of thought about like the concept of, well, one day want to get a fursuit of him.
Right.
And so I want to think about like, how would I be? Because I care a lot about fursuit performance as well.
Mhm.
I was like, well, how would I want to be if I was in fursuit with him? Because you mentioned earlier, like, I used to dance in fursuit,
Yeah.
and I kind of had to come to this acceptance of like, well, when I get him, I think to some degree he might be a little difficult to dance in. So if I can't dance in him as well, how do I want to act in him? And I was
Yeah.
like, well, maybe I could be like sort of in this hunched over manner because he's top heavy. Maybe like he's more designed to properly walk on all fours, but then he has the ability to stand up and he can kind of huddle around like on like his, on his hind legs or whatever. So I've kind of like jumped back and forth between the idea of like what way do I prefer him to move around. And I'm gonna be honest, I think it really just depends on what he's doing. Like if he's like trying to do some normal thing where he's like, all right, he's gonna go hobble over to the kitchen to like go, grab something from the fridge. It's a 7.5 foot tall werewolf who's like clumsily opening the fridge. I guess he'll just walk over on all fours. Or if he's like waking up, rolling out of bed after like a crazy night or something, like how's he hobbling around?
Oh no, I love that. And I love that like mention of like, how like the size will make like smaller fine tasks like difficult and like, clumsy. Like completely unrelated. I watched K-pop Demon Hunters the other day, and I'm just
such
thinking
a good movie.
cat trying to put the like plant back up and can't because he's like too big and he doesn't have the dex. Anyways, that just would make me think of it, and I love that stuff with like transformation. So
same here. Yeah, just what you were mentioning there is also a big part of why I'm so happy with finally coming to terms with this character. Is he's a lot of details and things that I found in myself that I never quite celebrated or enjoyed in my character. And one of those factors is like the clumsiness and being kind of like a big dumb idiot. Because I've always felt like, from a surface level, you can like meet or interact with someone. And before you even do that, you can see someone from afar. And I feel like there's always going to be this level of intimidation just socially before you talk to someone like, like they look cool, or like, oh my God, they look a little intimidating, like, or like, oh, they're like this very well-known person, like, oh, am I cool enough to talk to them, So I wanted his design to be like, okay, he has this intimidating factor because he's a werewolf.
Exactly.
But when you talk to him or interact with him, he's actually just a big dummy. Like he's not, he's new to his form and his figure, and he doesn't know much. Like he just kind of hobbles around, he likes to go hunting, or so you think, like he doesn't know how to like function with his phone. He has big dumb bappers, I just, it does so many funny things in my brain when I think about like big dumb clumsy adjusting to the new form. That's always a big one.
So good.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, then let me pose a slightly different question, because I also like to ask this to the folks who like werewolves. I feel like because they're so universal, like, again, they have so many different connections to different cultures around the world. Everyone knows what a werewolf is. It's a very easy way to communicate, like, oh, I'm into transformation, and here's like, werewolves is a good example. Do you feel like, because I feel like I see this sometimes in the discourse, TM, sometimes people are like, oh, well, it's kind of frustrating that that's just like the default, because that's just what everyone thinks of when you think of transformation. And I wonder, like, do you feel like people have a point when they say that, or do you think they're being too harsh?
I'm a very, very kind of middle of the road kind of guy where like I try to always understand both sides. Like, to a degree, I do agree that like it can be a pretty harsh statement, but at the same time, being the sort of like middle ground TF obsessed person that I am, I also kind of see it from that angle too, where I'm like, like it, to some fashion, like you're not wrong. But also, we all have opinions, and like I can also disagree too, like also not right too. I think that's where like it kind of ties into the beauty of being a furry, but being in the TF community, is that yes, we may have like our main OC, but we also can take on other forms and then create OCs out of those forms. And I like to always try to think of it in that sort of way where like, like we were talking about earlier, where you can associate someone's human self TFing into whatever it is portrayed in that art piece, and you can be like, oh, that's that person. I feel like that's kind of where it starts to like blur that like line statement of like, oh, that's the like trademark TF character, this and that, that, it's like, or species, I mean, is it just really depends on like how they're being portrayed, and like, hey, like what's your like visual or like your perspective on like TF, but I try to like, this kind of delves a little away from the question, but like it sort of like stems from it, which is, it's the beauty of like why one, I'm proud of having like a werewolf character because, like, yeah, like you said, it can be kind of this like staple for like a TF sort of figure character.
Yeah.
But then I feel like, I have found a way to even branch from that into like other characters that I've like
Hmm.
started to kind of form just by like expressing more openly,
Right.
like, oh, that is me, so
Yeah. And did
yeah.
you feel like I mean you kind of talked about this earlier, but like I know obviously you went from German Shepherd to werewolf. Did you
Yeah.
feel like that German Shepherd form after a period of time was kind of like restricting you from those sorts of explorations, and it was like going to the werewolf that really enabled that?
Very, very much so. And I think because we're in the same sphere of understanding for that.
Yeah.
My German Shepherd character, I felt like I designed him to reflect, again, that time period of me. But that time period of me was also so like afraid of opening up about parts of myself. And I
Hmm.
felt like that character kind of reflected that they were contained in that way. So when I did make the werewolf character, it was kind of like removing the weights and letting
Yeah.
loose
Yeah.
more of
Yeah.
those elements. Um,
Hmm.
I've kind of started doing that too, even with like some of my other characters that I haven't like fully fleshed out yet, but they're like sort of it was like a silhouette, and I'm still figuring out more details on those characters too, and it
Yeah.
just feels good. It feels very fleeting when you finally are able to like say, hey, this character I've evolved past them. Now this character means that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. No, I love that. I guess then maybe perhaps final question on the werewolf front. When you have, I know you've been in a bit of like a not in a position to make a lot of it, but when you have made your own kind of werewolf TFs,
Hmm.
would you say that the way in which they are kind of seen in society and different cultures and such has affected the angle at which you approach them? And what I mean by that is like, did you feel like you needed to play into certain tropes, or did you feel like, no, actually I want to make sure I'm subverting certain things when I'm making my own werewolf transformations to make them mine?
Oh wow, that's a beautiful question. I think at first, way before I even made my character, I felt that way. Like there was some sort of like kind of having to conform.
Yeah.
But then how I counteracted that was I had to remind myself when I was starting to flesh out this character that like no, a part of why this character is going to exist is to subvert a lot of those tropes or those the way that like they're portrayed in certain aspects,
Right.
and he's supposed to be sort of letting more loose and kind of doing your own thing. So yeah, so both the yes and no, and I think that's been
Hmm.
kind of like yet again another reason why I love the way that this character is formed so much is that they subverts a lot of those portrayals of which cultures and other parts of society deem like a werewolf, right? Like because a
Yeah,
werewolf,
exactly.
yes, is these things, but then the way that the werewolf becomes is like, hey, this is how I want them to become.
Yeah, exactly.
While still tackling some of those like factors.
Awesome. No, that totally makes sense. And I think that it's always interesting to hear how people kind of grapple with the like I guess cultural connotations to a degree with werewolves, because I
Yeah.
feel like like they're often very much associated with like puberty and such, and like
Yeah.
they have
Yeah.
certain tropes. I mean, like we think about like Teen Wolf or what have you,
Mhm.
but there's so much more you can do with
Yeah.
them that's beyond just that. And I feel like there's always this kind of like central push and pull in terms of how much do I want to play into expectations versus how much I want to subvert them, and
Yeah.
finding that balance is a very like personal kind of decision that you have to make in terms of
Yes.
what will feel the most authentic. So,
Very much so, yeah. I think like my last little tidbit because you hit on something pretty well there at the end, which
mhm,
reminded me that like I think a big part of designing. I don't want to say like designing one's werewolf, but like when you're essentially figuring out your character, and in this case werewolves.
yeah,
I think a fun part, at least for me, was like a lot of things that I used to be very hard on myself or like view in a negative manner with like my self image.
mhm,
I remember growing up, especially like as I was going through earlier days of the fandom, seeing like other body types that I was like really attracted
yeah,
to, or being like, wow, like, man, I'm so jealous. They like don't have body hair, and like, I wish I didn't have body hair, and this and that, and that. And fast forward to the present, I started to accept myself and my image, just how my body is naturally.
Yeah.
I would say like when I entered my 30s, I was like, well, hey, you're only gonna keep aging. You can't stop that. Everyone ages. So let's flip the script and like be proud of who you are.
Yeah.
And I now proudly, happily like embrace like my ethnicity, my heritage, my body hair, my, the way that my body kind of changes as I get older, like
Yeah.
we're not always going to be a twink. We're not always going to be this body type. You know what I mean? Like and it's fun that I can do that with a werewolf because werewolves are hairy. And, it's known in werewolf media that like when a character is bit by a werewolf and they're starting to go through that slow progression, what the heck? They have more body hair on their arms, or they have more body hair on their legs or something like that. And so I just did funny things in my brain when creating them. It was like, cool, I'm accepting myself through this character.
Yeah. No,
And I would hope
that.
that others can find that, as they design their werewolf character in that same sphere,
No, absolutely. I will say just to add on to that body hair part, I'm a very hairy person myself, and the funny thing for me is that my back hair has a very weird kind of patchy pattern to it, and I have always preached that it is, I'm just mid transformation. That's how I've always
love that.
It's because it's very like, again, very patchy, and it's like, I don't, and I'm like, listen, I'm partway there. Okay, give it time. So.
I love that. Again, yet another beauty of being obsessed with transformation is like it just helps us cope.
It really does.
Cool. Really cool. Now I'm sitting here like, man, I kind of wish that I had your body hair, like my current age.
Oh my gosh. We did have an audience question that I wanted to leave time for, and I think it's a very interesting one, and I have some thoughts too on it. But the question comes from Other Side, and he asks, have you ever experienced the feeling where when you're in a friend group like a TF server, or like a circle similar, you felt like you were being left behind or almost like inadvertently pushed out due to not having the same interests, or maybe not clicking as specifically with kind of like things that the others are enjoying? And if you have, what did you do about it?
Oh, interesting. So I have to think a little bit more. I'm kind of like going through the filing cabinet as my brain of memories. I can't quite say that there has been a particular situation where like I was in like a TF group, like in this setting, and felt like I was alienated per se. Like it sounds kind of like, because I'm like dissecting the question too, and that like, I feel like there's also kind of like this internal demon sort of battle with that question too. And I would say that like not quite like I was alienated just because I wasn't into similar things that like a friend group I was with, but rather just more kind of self-actualization of, oh man, am I into these things that maybe these friends aren't into, and then I started to kind of feel a little left out in that regard. No, thankfully I've been very, very blessed in the sense that I haven't been sort of like exiled because I'm into things that like they're not into per se. But I have definitely been in like some groups like many, 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 many years ago where like, the joke is being thrown around of like, oh, imagine being into like this kink, or like a little bit of like light kink shaming. And it's kind of made me feel like a little, alienated in that regard, but still never quite to the point of like, okay, like, I don't belong fully. And I would say that like with those kinks, I don't want to like say too much because like I don't know what the parameters are on the podcast, but
you can say whatever you want.
Okay, cool. So like I feel like a very, very complicated topic that is like always at the forefront. So the discourse wheel that constantly circulates in the fandom. ABDL is always kind of right there. I feel like that's always a very, very complicated, misunderstood subject. So I feel like that has occasionally gotten brought up, and I myself, I am very, very like hush about it in current days because I stream and I'm like kind of like at the forefront in a lot of like content, and so I don't talk about that openly, but like ABDL has always been something that's been kind of like a personal, sensitive subject to me, as I'm like surrounded by a lot of other ABDL friends and whatnot, but also the other complicated one that has been kind of brought up that has made me feel a little uncomfortable in the past, but now I feel comfortable talking about it,
Yeah.
has been like weight gain, fat fur, like
Yes.
slob kind of stuff. And I feel like there's also this kind of like misunderstanding of it too, where like, it gets joked about or talked about in this sort of like manner
yeah.
where it's like you feel a little uncomfortable talking about it. But I feel like that's kind of like a lot of kinks in general. Is like if you're just with the
Mhm.
wrong group or friends who don't fully understand it, you can kind of feel a little alienated. But
Yeah.
no, I've been very blessed in a lot of TF groups I've been in throughout the years where that's not been a big problem. I would say that's been more of a thing with friends who are not into TF because I have
Yeah.
had that happen.
Yeah.
I feel like TF friends have been very accepting and very, very understanding in like kind of all regards. And I think that's been why I'm like so proudly wearing it like openly, where
Yeah.
I've felt a lot more belonging in that regard than I have with
Mhm.
like, hey, I'm in a furry friend group rather than I'm in a furry TF friend group. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't want to say like I wish I could answer that a little bit better, but
No,
I've
I
been
think that's a great
again very,
answer.
very grateful that I can not have to worry about it as much with my people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that not in on the same topics per se, but I know that like Upside Down TF was one that I didn't really like advertise for a long time, in part
Mm-hmm.
because of, there's like a squick factor for a lot of people, and like
Yeah.
it touches on certain things that people are not fans of, which is fine.
Yeah.
But I definitely felt like there was a little bit of self-censorship to some degree with
Mm.
that. I think I haven't really felt like, oh, I was like in a friend group where I got ostracized either per se. I definitely
Yeah, yeah.
have been in friend groups where my interests were not challenged, but I was like presented with something that challenged my priors. And a very
Mm.
easy one to think of is, back in the aughts, in particular on websites like Transfer,
Mhm.
Pokemon TF was very much frowned upon. And so,
Oh, yeah.
obviously it's had this huge explosion since then. But,
Yeah.
at the time, it was very much like, oh, I didn't understand why that was an interest to people. And then as more and more art came out, I was like, oh no, this is just like, this is another thing that opens up a lot of avenues. There's
Yeah.
a lot of like interesting creature forms, and you can play with that. And like, like you can also like do your own like bestial iterations on them. Like there's a lot you can do with them as a form. And so that
Yeah.
was one where maybe I initially was kind of like, and now I'm like, oh no, this is great. I love this. But yeah, I think to kind of echo your point, I think the only time I've ever had any sort of like, oh, I'm not really like sure what to do with that is like with non TF, non furry friends. And even then,
Mhm.
I've been very lucky in that, like, I don't talk about like the TF stuff with them per se, but I wear tails around in my daily life, and they've all gone
Oh,
used to
that's
it. So,
awesome. Aw. I that hearing you like do that as a way of like expressing but also finding your place of happiness and joy. Hearing you like wearing your tail around makes me so happy. I am very much an advocate of that.
yeah.
Especially like as a fursuiter. I have been and I still am to this day a proud enjoyer of like, hey, I advocate wear your tail. If that wearing
Yes.
your tail
Yes.
makes you feel good and it like hits that like that certain part of your brain, do it,
Go for
because
it.
I also love wearing it. I unfortunately have been wearing my tail as much as I wish I could. So
Yeah.
hearing you say that inspired me.
Yeah, no, I honestly, it is a genuine, very important part of self-actualization.
Yeah.
It's very rare that I'm not wearing a tail, so
Yeah. Oh.
I think that I've almost always had pretty good reactions in public. The only age group I'm always leery of are the teenagers, and
Yeah.
the thing there is I don't let it phase me because I'm like, I am so much older than you. I do not
Yep.
care. I have very different like life problems to deal with, and you are probably just ashamed of things internally. So I'm not going to let this harsh my vibe. But
Yeah, that's good.
old ladies love them. I will say, I always get compliments from the old ladies. So I thank you, Gertrude and Matilda, for that.
I'm genuinely curious. Yeah, I actually kind of want to bounce it back to you because I
Yeah.
personally would love to hear, and I would hope that others listening to the podcast would too. What is a recent positive interaction you had with like, an old lady that was
Oh,
admiring your tail? That comes to
Okay.
mind.
There was one time where I was okay, well actually I'll tell two stories because the
Yeah.
first one is
Fire
more
away. Yeah.
unexpected and then the other one is more in line with your question. So I was in McDonald's
Mhm.
and this is like a McDonald's I go to all the time. And there was a guy who came up to me who was a little bit older than me, but like roughly the same age and was like asking me about the tail. And I was wearing, I think, my red panda tail at the time. And he was just like,
Mhm.
"Oh, that's like such a cool tail. Like, where did you get that? Blah, blah, blah." And I was like
Mhm.
explaining. And he was like, "Oh, yeah, because, my girlfriend, she like does streaming and like she likes tails or something. And I'm just trying to understand because I might want to like get one for her. Like, do you have any tips on like where to look?" And I was like, "Oh, you found the perfect person to ask." And so I like pulled up Etsy and I was like, "Okay, so these are some of the makers that like I've ordered from before, and like here's how from like a quality perspective, it's always better to try and find them in person, but obviously that's very difficult, blah blah blah." I gave him like a
Yeah.
whole rundown and he was like very appreciative. He was also probably a little bit drunk, but like honestly that probably emboldened him to ask me, and I was like, "Thank you for asking me. You picked the perfect person."
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that one happened only like I think 2 or 3 months ago, and that one is very fresh in my mind. But the other one
Yeah.
I will mention is that I did have a nice old lady who was on the streetcar with me in Toronto, and she was very much admiring it, but I think she was like a little bit hesitant to necessarily say anything because she was, I think, very like probably like respectfully was like, "Oh, I don't want to like say the wrong thing because like old people have a reputation around things that maybe are more like queer coded or whatever."
Yeah.
When I
Yeah.
was getting up to get off the streetcar, she
Mm.
did like kind of like go like, "Oh, I just I really like your tail. I've never seen anything like it before. Is it a fashion trend?" And I was like, "You know what?" I was like, not quite, but I'd like to make it one." And she was like, "Well, good for you." And then I went on my way. So, anyways.
Oh, that makes me so happy. Oh my gosh. See, like that right there, your two stories, and I'm sure you have many other stories you can go on about. That inspires me to want to rock my tail. I used to like in the earlier fandom days, I would wear my tail every fur meet I went to,
Hell yeah.
parties, cons when I wasn't in full suit. I would always wear my tail. I don't
Yeah.
know what it was. Like what I don't know what happened, but like the last I'd say 2, 3 years. I haven't been wearing my tail and I'm throwing. So I think
You
the
got to
next
get back
time,
on it.
yeah. No, you inspired me. So when I wear my tail now, I want you to know that you can proudly be the reason that I got back into wearing my tail again.
Good.
So keep on with
Ah,
it. Keep
I
on.
love hearing that. That's like that's delightful to me. So, oh, awesome. Well, that was all the questions I had. I don't know if you have any questions for me.
Oh man, this is the beauty of why I was so excited to jump on this podcast because you you and Libra do such a phenomenal job at like proposing all these questions and just kind of like delving more into us.
Mm.
And I feel like podcasts can be a like sort of like, hey, we want to know more about our guests. I love to know more about you guys. So like any opportunity I get to like talk to you
Yeah,
guys is always a blast. So, first of all, thank you for all these
of
questions.
course.
It's been fun to talk about. I'm gonna actually bounce a little back to you.
Mhm.
And I actually would love to hear you talk a little bit more about like how did you come to terms with your current main character and what they represent about you?
Ooh, okay. So,
Species wise and just
yeah,
overall
yeah.
lore wise.
So I've been a Lombax for a number of years now. And
Mhm.
I've talked about that quite extensively on the podcast. And they are still my main character, but I'm going to slightly tweak the question and answer about the more recent alt Sona and like
Mhm.
other characters I have, just because I've spent a lot more time recently as a snow leopard. It's one of
Mhm.
my alt Sonas, and it came about in part because of a tabletop role playing game that I was in with a friend of the podcast, Toledo.
Mhm.
And it was a Star Trek setting, and there was a very hot snow leopard that was introduced as the ship's counselor,
Oh,
who
that's awesome.
through some shenanigans, he ended up dating my character that I was playing. And one of the things that really kind of I had been working through was the fact that we don't have to just have one form. Like we can obviously, one is always going to be your main form, but like we can play around with stuff. And I think that part of my like interest in transformation has always been the shape-shifting element. And so
Mm,
it really allowed me to think about how, oh, I like there's no rules, right? Like I can
yeah.
have more than one form if I want. And so snow leopards had actually been one that I had considered back in the day before I leapt onto lombaxes, and I was like,
Mhm.
well, I could just also be a snow leopard. Like there's nothing stopping me from doing that. And
Yeah.
the connection through the role playing game really like illuminated to me how much I like them. So like adopting that as a form was like really nice. And in part I think it kind of allowed me to embody a bit more of like a warmer and gentler side to some degree. Not to say that that's
Mm,
not evident in my other ones, but I
mhm.
think I coded my character there to have a lot more of those elements. And also, I made him buff because at the time I was like thinking about going on a gym kind of like journey, so to speak, but hadn't really
Oh,
like
okay.
embarked on one yet. And I was like, this can be something that's aspirational. And
Yeah.
now I'm like 15 months deep into that, and so that's been really nice to see. But yeah, I feel like having another character is a way to like really kind of encapsulate different elements of yourself that you want to bring to the forefront or embody. And it's
Right.
interesting too because my fursuit I don't consider a sona necessarily, which is always gets like some raised eyebrows. But I almost think of my fursuit character Equinox, who's a crossfox,
Mhm.
as basically a character that I like to embody, but I see it more as like a role to perform, basically. Because
Mm, mhm.
I did a lot of like theater and improv back in the day. And one of the things I really enjoy with that is I can be someone who is different from me in certain elements.
Mm.
But I'm not like married to that concept. Like it's not something I have to be at all times. It's something that I can indulge in when I
Yeah.
want to, and like play up certain elements. And so with him, like I get to be more of like a bit of a bad boy. He's a trickster, et cetera, et cetera. A little bit looser with his moral fiber, but at the end of the day, he also wants people to get what they want at the end. I think that's an important kind of through line. And so I have a lot of fun playing around with him too, and that's been more of like kind of a recent development. So yeah,
Oh, I love that. So I actually just talked about this on stream the other night
yeah,
about how one of my big loves about the fandom, and in this case, the TF community, is I absolutely love hearing the whys behind someone's character. And I think if I recall, the first time I met you, like actually got to
hmm
like talk to you,
yeah,
if I recall, you were wearing your Snep mask, right? Like
yes,
you had like the
yes,
half mask. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I remember seeing you wear that, and without any context and understanding of your character. Now that I have an understanding of it, it makes it that much more special now knowing like, oh, that's how they
hmm
were created. That's what they mean to you. And it's just really, really cool to hear that they encapsulate all of these different details and aspects of like again
hmm
that other side of yourself. And you said yourself that like your lombax is always going to be kind of like the main, but like this
oh yeah,
part is like the new current one. And for many reasons, really, really many awesome reasons. And now I can look at your Snep character and be like, oh, that's so cool when I see that character, because I'm now gonna have a good understanding of like
yeah,
what exactly they are and like who they are to you in your current time of your life.
yeah.
So
No, thank
that's
you.
awesome. That's really, really cool.
Really appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, I because I've been doing a lot of like I've been getting a lot of commissions and such. Like I think like the jock snow leopard has come up a few times now in kind of some of these pieces, but I always like emphasize this is like almost like I don't want to say like a reclaiming because there's not something to reclaim, but like
Yeah,
think of like a kind, gentle jock, like one who
yeah,
who cares about you and is also still intelligent. I don't know. I
yeah.
find that that's such a fun thing to play with, and especially as I'm doing like my like kind of gym journey, it's definitely like an aspiration to also get there at some point that I find is very motivating. So
I love that you said like a smart jock, because we both know this very well, that
yeah,
there's the trope of transforming from normal like kind of skinnier shape figure into like minus int dumb jock, you
Yes,
know? And
yes.
I love that you're like doing the opposite where you're still, you know, maintaining your or retaining your intelligence, you know,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
you are a smart, you know, very creative person. And I like that, like, hey, you know what, your shape may get bigger, but your
Yeah.
brain is still there.
It's still there.
You
Yeah,
know?
I agree, and, like, I love some of the negative int stuff too, don't get me wrong, but, like,
Yeah.
especially for a form for myself, I'm like, "No, this is me. I'm
Yeah.
not going to, I don't need to subtract anything,
Yeah.
for me
Yeah.
to still be able to inhabit it," you know? So
Yeah. You mentioned that you did love improv and whatnot too.
Mhm.
I actually love hearing that too because a big part of what I've admired about fursuiting, because it ties into like how you kind of like view your snep character, especially when you're like wearing your mask and whatnot. Funnily enough, this actually is kind of what's helping me still maintain a pretty strong passion for the current fursuit that I have. I've
Yes.
actually been on the brink of retiring that German Shepherd fursuit
Mhm.
character because you know now I'm werewolf.
Yeah.
But if it weren't for a lot of, I'm trying to think of like specific artists, but one that comes to mind is I'd say Mooney,
Oh, yeah.
who does a lot of the like fursuit pull toy stuff.
Yes. Very good
Um,
stuff.
if it wasn't for like fursuit TF art like that, that has helped me with being able to still have this like desire and passion for
Mhm.
wearing that current fursuit because it does funny thing to my brain of like, you know,
Yes.
I'm gonna improv that like in my mind, I am transformed now into a fursuit. You
Exactly.
know?
That's a perfect
And
way of thinking of it.
yeah, I don't know. I just like love hearing like your journey and like how you discovered what your snep character means to you. And
Mhm.
you know, had it not been for like hearing a story like that and then like seeing some of the other inspirational like TF art out there, it's definitely helped me with piecing together like what does my fursuit still mean to me and how can I wear them and still sort of like be a character or improv like what I am visibly, you know?
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So
And I'll say as well, like, I am in the process of getting my Lombax full suit made, but that doesn't mean I'm going to abandon my CrossFox Equinox. Like, they just mean
yeah,
different things. And,
yeah.
I've always enjoyed the kind of acting elements. And I mean, I've infused a lot of that into like my Dungeons and Dragons playing and like my TTRPGs and such. But
Mhm.
fursuiting is such a fun avenue to put it in as well. And
Yeah.
the fun part is also like not everyone knows that I have this fursuit, so they don't necessarily associate it with me, which means I
Yeah.
can kind of rove around and do other stuff because I'm wearing badges that just say his name, not Zill.
Yeah.
So I can get away with some shenanigans, as it were, which I always find fun. So
Oh, that is fun. No, the element of the mystery behind who it is, I think that that does such a special thing to both mascotting, character acting, and then also just like the facade of being the character. I think it's
exactly,
a very beautiful thing.
yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. No, that makes me so happy to hear. I love learning of, you know, what like makes you more you. And I don't know how much you've gotten a chance to talk about your snep character, or even like, you know, some of your characters on
Very
the
little.
podcast, but
Very little actually, because it's always what's the draw to Lombaxes, and I'm like, I listen, I can talk about Lombaxes till the cows come home. Don't get me wrong, but I will always take an opportunity to talk about some of the other stuff because I think it's interesting too.
that's really cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. And if you don't mind, like, I'd love to ask you one more question
Yes,
because,
please
you know,
go
it
for
sounds
it.
like we don't get to talk much about like your cool stuff.
No, no, I'm delayed. Please ask away.
Yeah. So you're talking about how, you know, you're constantly getting asked about Lombaxes. You talked about your snub character. What would you say is another species that you've been either like obsessed with, in love with, and you're kind of teasing the idea of like having maybe a more fleshed out character
Hmm.
with?
That is a great question. So I think a lot about in a weird way. I think a lot about some of my past sonas that I like kind of moved on from.
Mhm.
In particular, there was this period where like I went through a number of different Sona changes because none were quite fitting.
Mm-hmm.
One species that I've always held very near and dear to my heart, but just like I was one for a hot minute, and then I kind of moved on. Was sharks. I've always loved
Oh, I
sharks a lot.
love sharks. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
they're so good, and there's like some really amazing fursuits I've seen recently of sharks. That like
Agreed.
a Squid Inu, I think is the name of the person who like got one recently, and like
Mm,
just absolutely incredible design. I've always toyed with like going back to making a shark form. The problem I've just always found is like I've never been able to settle on what exactly I want it to look like and
yeah.
what kind of like element of my character I want to really infuse into that one in particular that makes it distinct
Mm,
from like my other ones. So I've toyed around with that for like many a year, and I've
mm,
never like fully like committed to any, but it's always there, like kind of like bubbling under the surface. And so,
mm,
if there was one I was going to suspect would like crop up at some point, it would probably be that.
mm.
And then I guess the other angle I'll say, which is a funny angle, is I've technically always had a alt Sona that's a dragon. Like I have a dragon form, and I have like
Oh, okay.
and everything, but I very rarely play with it. And I think part of the reason why is in the way I initially envisioned him is different from how I perhaps would envision him now. And like, yeah, you can do like kind of a one to one and just be like, okay, I'm going to rewrite him to be X way.
Yeah.
But I don't know, there's like something tripping me up there from like a mental block. And so I haven't really like used him very much, even though I
Mm,
love dragons. Again, like that was my first like alt Sona after the Lombax, and
mhm.
I did get like a bunch of art of him at the time, and it's really just a question of like what kind of niche do I want him to occupy if I want to make him properly fleshed out, and that's the thing that I haven't quite like encapsulated yet. So
Mm,
that was
okay.
like one I probably want to tool around with and such, but technically he's still been there the whole time. It's just I haven't been using him as much, I guess. So yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. This is gonna be my calling to you, an advocate that I do hope and wish that someday to see a more fleshed out version of these characters, because to me it sounds like they mean a lot to you.
Oh
But
yeah.
as you mentioned, you still are struggling to figure out like how to flesh them out, what exactly they'll
Mhm.
represent, so forth. All very, very relatable. I myself have struggled with like fleshing out a few characters of my own,
Yeah.
and I imagine that like a lot of our other friends and peers are also going through the same. So it fills me with a lot of happiness to hear that you have had these other characters on the chopping block, but
Mhm.
just that you're waiting for the right day and moments that it just clicks with you, and
Yeah.
you're like, cool, that's it right
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
So,
And
and when that day comes around, I'll be very happy to see that.
thank you. And I think I'll just mention like one of the things that's always like made me a bit apprehensive is like I worry about having too many, but also there's no rules. Like there's
Yep.
no rule that you can have too many. It's more just like, oh, if I'm like too many things, are people not going to understand like who I am? But it's like that's kind of counterproductive because if what you are is many things, then you're not really being yourself, and people aren't getting to
Yep.
see that. So it's just it's that
Yes.
like tug of war mentally.
Yeah, that's my rule, or not my rule of thumb, but my philosophy is always, who makes the rules? We
Yeah,
make the
no one. We make the
rules.
rules.
No one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's our rules.
Oh my
Thank you
gosh.
for sharing that, though. I love hearing about all that, and like I said, whenever the day comes around that they're flushed out, I will happily look at those characters and be like,
Amazing.
oh yes, now I know the struggles that they went through to get to that point, and now I see them in the flesh. So that's
Yeah.
really cool.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
And
thank
thank
you.
you thank you so much for not only the questions but also like coming on and like, chatting with me. I've had a really great time getting to chat with you
Same.
more about all of this stuff, and it's been such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. And if
Thank
people are
you.
looking for you around online, where can they find you?
They can find me over, I would say my main channel and place is twitch.tv/Doryuu with a Z at the end, or
Mhm.
as some call me, DoryuuZ. So that is my main place. But you can actually find me pretty much everywhere else as DoryuuZ. Both on my Blue Sky, um, my Twitter, FA. Actually, no, FA is minus a Z.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say mostly everywhere. YouTube. Instagram, TikTok, all the platforms.
All
Just
of the
DoryuuZ.
forms.
DoryuuZ. All forms. All forms.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on. Like, again, it was so great to get to chat with you. And I hope our audience enjoyed our wonderful chat as well.
Likewise.
And I think we've given them a lot to chew on, metaphorically and literally speaking. So
The beauty of being a TFer is our jokes are intentional or maybe unintentional.
exactly.
But
And
it's always appreciated.
it's always appreciated. All right. Well, audience, I hope y'all had a great time listening as much as we did recording. I hope that you all get some good rest, get those 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Remember to hydrate, keep an open mind, and stay TFy. And I will see you all back here again next week.
Cannot emphasize that enough. And thank you so much again for having me. Thank you, guys. Keep doing what you do. TF Podcast is amazing. Provides something very special for this community. So thank you again.
Awesome. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers. Thank you again.